Welcome to Takes Us to Politics. I'm Blackheart, and I'm joined by Dougie and our new permanent co-host, Bray.
Pleasure
Tonight,
to
we
be here.
shine the spotlight on a true pioneer in healthcare, Lady Truism. With a robust career in pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, she's at the forefront of the industry innovations and patient care advancements. We'll delve into her journey, explore the breakthroughs she's been a part of, and uncover the future of healthcare through her expert eyes. Don't miss this deep dive into a fascinating field with one of the most experienced leaders. Lady Truism, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Bray, and thank you so much, Blackheart and Doug, for having me.
Absolutely.
Good for you to have you on. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
Would you like to start from the very beginning when you first decided to head down this path?
Yeah. So going back like way, let's see. I'm not going to be shy. I'm 48 and have been in the healthcare industry um, as a profession for over 25 years. But the responsibility of healthcare being in my lap did fall upon me in my early childhood as my brother suffered from type 1 diabetes. And my mother was a single mom raising 4 kids. And I was the middle child who was my big brother. And so I had a lot of responsibility with respect to testing his blood sugar and had a very early introduction into what chronic disease meant for the impact of the totality of a family. And I knew ultimately at that point that I wanted to go into healthcare. And once I got into college, I thought, you know what, maybe I've seen too much of uh, what goes on with patients from a personal perspective. Maybe mental health counseling is the way to really, save the world. And so I went that route after I graduated UCF and decided to get my master's in mental health counseling. And while I was, I'd like to think good at what I was doing, I don't think it was good for me, as I would, come home and it would bring back um, past trauma of things from my childhood. So I thought, well, if I can't save the world working with patients face to face, what else can I do? And that's where I fell into pharmaceuticals. And it didn't hurt that the money was a lot higher. It was a pretty nice dangling carrot at a career fair that I went to. And I've been in the industry ever since with some hops and jumps.
Wow. I think that's kind of a common story I hear a lot from people who go. They kind of go in with that mindset of I'm going to be a doctor, and then, I mean, there are so many reasons they end up dropping out. Obviously, one of them
Being a
being,
doctor's hard, by the way.
yeah, it turns out it takes
Yeah.
eight years of college followed by 4 more years of residency. It's tough.
Yeah, I dropped out.
But I don't think a lot of people kind of go down the path that you did. A lot of them, become nurses or somewhere around that area. Um, Hopping into a more commercialized industry where there's more money, but also more opportunity to make a difference, I think is unique for sure.
Yeah, thank you. You want to know a funny story?
Yes, I love
Fun
funny stories.
fact. Oh my gosh, you guys. So I hadn't even thought at this time, like, why? Like, I'm in mental health counseling, right? I've got an internship trying to finish my degree. I'm working at the AIDS Resource Alliance downtown. I've got a caseload of 40 or so clients, many of which back then I was the one who did a mouth swab and had to relay the results of positive or negative, and then guide them along the way and hold them and hug them. And just, oh, what a heavy load that was. But that's what I signed up for, right? So a good guy friend of mine, who we're still close to the day, and he still razzes me about this. He was going to a job fair. And so back then, it just sounds crazy to say back then, it really wasn't that freaking long ago, but we had job fairs, and they'd be like at these hotels, right? Like at the Ritz or, wherever. And, every pharmaceutical company was there. It was a pharma job fair, like Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, Eli Lilly, Amgen, and they're all in these separate rooms, right? And he's like, "Oh, lady, you've got to come with me. I can't go by myself." So I said, I'll go with you for moral support. And I was already dressed, for work that day. So I kind of looked, I guess, the pharma part. But I had no resume, no nothing. And I was there with my friend. We'll call him Matt. And he went in for his interview. I'm waiting outside anxiously, like peering in. He comes out, gives me the thumbs up. Really, he's sweaty and his face is red. And I just could tell, like, it could not have gone well. And the interviewer looks at me and goes, "Are you next?" And I no, sir, I'm here for support for Matt. And he goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I told him what I was doing. And he goes, "We have so many people that are so great at pharmaceutical sales that come from the mental health field and from the field that you're in. Are you still paying off your student loans?" Ooh, we went through a bunch of questions that hooked me right in. And he goes, "Why don't you just come in for an interview? Doesn't matter. You can send your resume later." I said, "All right. What the hell?" Meanwhile, my friend Matt's in the bathroom wiping off the sweat off of his face and all of his nerves. He probably peed himself. I'm not sure. I didn't ask. So I went in for the interview, and I left feeling super confident, but also confused as to like why he sucked me in. And he called me the next day to ask me to come into their headquarters. And a week later, I had a job offer with Eli Lilly and Company, which was my first pharmaceutical step. And it was a combination of, I felt it was right. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to go to sleep thinking about the patients that were dying that I was dealing with, and growing to love as friends and people and knowing their families. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I can help patients on the pharmaceutical side make more money, don't have to go to medical school, pay off loans. And I'll apologize to Matt later for taking his position. I
That's so funny.
know. That's what happened. Good story. That's
Wow.
okay. Oh
You
my
listed
God.
3 of like the most evil big pharma corporations to start.
I know. I know. I'm aware. I
That's so funny.
don't work for any of them anymore, but in my tenure, I did learn so much about the ins and outs and what's good about them and what's not. What's green and what's red.
I
Yep.
think it's become like more common knowledge. Back then, was it still seen the same way? I mean, if you ask anyone, like our age and younger, if you talk about big pharma, like it'll be pretty quick. They'll just be like, they're all evil. Was it like, did you guys have the same notion about these companies back then, or were you like, oh my god, these people are creating medicines, they're saving lives, like this is so awesome?
The latter, 100%. Yep, yep. It was not evil at the time, and especially in my mind, right? Like, so I'm in my early 20s and going into men's health and women's health with Eli Lilly, and they're creating the first and only medications for type 1, type 2 diabetes, juvenile diabetes. And I lost my brother, to that disease and the consequences thereof. And I thought, oh my gosh, is there something that could have saved him? A once a month shot versus taking, having 5 seizures a month, which damaged his brain, etc. So I genuinely thought at that time, as was the culture of my time, this is where we need to be, on the forefront of medication and saving lives with modern medicine that we didn't have before. Now, fast forward 25 plus years, I'm 48, I'll be 50 soon. So is my opinion the same? 1,000% no. And here's why. A pharmaceutical industry, especially the large names out there that make $400-500 billion a year, have taken advantage of that small notion that I had in my head and spread it like wildfire across the universe. And everyone there forward and still are brainwashed that all pharmaceuticals are the answer to every problem, including a fucking hangnail.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. There's a lot of talk now about the value of holistic medicine and even just changing your diet and its effect, and how these crazy lifetime chronic problems that people have had can just be cured with a better diet or just avoiding
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of sad. I mean, it is, obviously they've made great progress in advancing healthcare. It's just, American companies are gonna do whatever they can to make money, so can't blame them, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, when would you say that kind of transition in thinking happened?
I can tell you the exact moment
Mm,
that it happened. And it was at the height of, no, I'm going to back up the truck. It was not at the height of the opioid epidemic. It was prior to that, where uh, pill mills were opening up left and right all over the nation. And
Question
when
for
I
you,
say,
lady. Can you explain what that is real quick, just for those of us that don't know what a hill mill is?
I will, and thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a company which is called Purdue Pharmaceuticals. And I'm sure you've heard of them, as most of your audience has. Um, and as a result of the overprescribing of the medication oxycodone, uh, not only by their sales representatives and their leadership and increasing the dosage, we now fast forward, and this was what, 2000? We're 2024. That opioid epidemic is still growing, even though the time with which that product was launched was before 2000. What had occurred was it was so overprescribed, and patients were told, and sales reps were told, that this is non-addictive. This is for chronic pain after an accident, after a car accident, after a broken bone, after your wisdom teeth are removed. For the love of God. And this is coming from a woman who had 2 cesarean sections on only Advil.
mm,
So did anybody really need this drug? They did not. We were all smoothed, smuts, and every 7 seconds, somebody dies, not just overdoses, dies of an overdose from an opioid.
Wow.
So backing it up to what a pill mill is and was becoming at that time, there were urgent cares, ear, nose, and throat doctors, primary care physicians, all types of specialties that opened urgent cares as an ancillary benefit to their practice, by which they would see patients with quote unquote pain and haphazardly prescribe oxycodone to them. However, insurance didn't cover it. So these patients were paying cash to a doctor for a pain medication, which should have been covered by their insurance. But if it wasn't, that means something nefarious is going on, right? So how long did it take the government to catch up to that fact? 20 years.
Damn.
Wow.
20 years. And so it was during that time, going back to your question, it was during that time that I thought, all right, I'm going to work for this company called Collegium. And I launched a a a, a product called Extamsa, which is an oxycodone formulation that cannot be used, misused or abused. And I thought, this is how I'm going to save, those that are suffering from opioid addiction. We'll just move them over to this product that can't be abused. But guess what? Users will find out how to break that shit down. And they did that by adding Mountain Dew, putting it in the microwave, breaking down that coating, and still misusing that product. So, is there any form of oxycodone out there that is safe? And the answer is fucking no. No. Only in small doses if it's used according to how it's prescribed. But at this point, we haven't shown that that's even possible without one use. One pill can cause addiction.
Wow.
And without somebody's full medical history, a doctor has no way to decipher that. So that was the moment when I had a doctor look at me and say, "You're selling me Extamsa. Do you know what my patients call that? M&Ms, because they melt the coating off." I said, "Are you serious?" I quit that day.
Wow.
I quit that day and decided to do something different.
Which is crazy, right? And just so just for a little bit of like informative, kind of gap filling. So correct me if I'm wrong, but fentanyl is technically an opioid, correct?
It is.
Right. So like when a lot of people nowadays, like fentanyl's kind of the new hotness at the center of the opioid epidemic, but that's just like the most recent wave of it. There's been a couple of different ones, right? You had like the initial rise in like the 90s, then you had like the heroin increase in like the 2010s, and now we're at, the fentanyl sort of uptick. And just to kind of put numbers in perspective for people, so there's about 107,000 or 110,000 drug overdose deaths a year, and 75% of them are from opioids. So that's about, cranking the numbers here, some quick public school math. That's about 80,250 deaths a year from opioids compared to 20,000 from all the other drugs combined. So
Correct.
very deadly addiction.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
lived so I, yeah, it's I heard a lot about this when I was in Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City is like a
Oh,
huge hub of the opioid epidemic, both in terms of usage and in terms of busing the stuff around because it's like a crossroads in the middle of America, right? You can send that product east, west, north, south, and it's crazy like how dangerous it's getting. It's kind of getting worse, right? Like you maybe see on the news, or you see some of the people who, post on YouTube like going into, all these sort of like drug bazaars or whatever, and they're just like selling that shit out in the open, and it's like so wild. But it's kind of crazy to think that this whole thing started because of, at least from what you're arguing, right? That this kind of started from big pharma pushing this drug and then being like, oh, oopsies, like we've
yeah.
started something pretty bad.
It's exactly how it happened. And I'm sure you're familiar. And if not, I'll share with you the lawsuits that were brought against Purdue and their
Mhm.
constituents for creating what it was that they created. And
Yep.
the family that, and still owns Purdue, some of them have stepped down, but I mean, it's a big freaking family. they tried to backpedal as much as they could, even during the time with which they were, marketing this drug. And what occurred were, doctors were prescribing it they would look at your face, Bray, and for example, Bray, they'd look at you and go, that looks like a cancerous mole. I'm going to give you 80 milligrams once a day of oxycodone. Not to
That's
make,
good.
I've got a cream for that. It's fine. Talk about that later. So, I mean, that's how easily it was being passed out. And there's a recent film, and Doug, maybe you can help me with this one, where, what is the name of it? Emma
Stone, Emma Watson.
Emma Stone maybe was in it. And I think it was called Hard Sell or something like, maybe that's not right. But she played the part of a sales rep that was scooched up by Purdue and was launching this drug and was really believing she was saving people, even her own like friends and neighbors in the trailer park where she lived, and they were dying. And he was calling on this doctor in Lakeland, Florida. And this is just some no man doctor and some, maybe he might have seen like 5 patients a day, a primary care guy. She hit him up to be a speaker. And what that means is, hey, doc, I think that you would be great at speaking at conventions to your peers about the product oxycodone. Here's what you need to do, and here's how you get paid. And fast forward, he gets trained. He gets paid for a speaking event. The company pays $10,000-$20,000 for this large speaking event, inclusive of lobster and steak and all the things. And next thing you know, there's 50 doctors that attend. This presenter in Lakeland, who is a no-man guy, he gives this presentation. Now there's 50 prescribers doing exactly what he's doing. Put that on a scale nationally, and you see how that grew. Now, this guy was arrested, and it's personal for me because it was a portrayal in the movie, but there actually was a doctor in Lakeland, and I called on him. I know exactly who it was. And he went from having, 5 urgent care, primary care patients a day to having a line. And when I say a line, I'm talking like Black Friday in 1980 something, when moms were trying to get the Cabbage Patch Kids for their kids, right? So that kind of shit. Lines were so long that cops were called and they would patrol. They wouldn't do anything. They would patrol. And this would happen in doctor's office after doctor's office, until the point where we, as reps and those that were in the know, started calling them, and here's where the term came from, pill mills. Because all they would end up doing is pumping out pills. They weren't making money off of seeing Joe Schmo for an earache anymore and charging their insurance. They're like, all right, every patient that walks in the door is going to be on my pain program, and I'm going to charge each patient $275 per visit plus the pills.
Wow.
And that's what happened.
Wow. That is a lot of money. Now,
Yeah.
in terms of opioids, like fentanyl, do you think that insurance companies are profiting off of opioid prescriptions currently, more so than they were 20, 30 years ago?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Not the insurance companies. They're, at this point, insurance companies will need what's called step therapy. So, say for example, now they were at the time,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Um, but once it became a full blown epidemic, um, the insurance companies said, "Okay, Doug, you've got a pain, you've got a broken arm. Well, I'm going to give you extra strength Advil because your insurance won't cover Oxy.
Mm.
But if that doesn't work, just let me know and I can get you the Oxy." So Doug goes home, has a broken arm, takes some prescription Advil, doesn't cut it. He's like, fucking hurts. My friends are saying that they've got Oxy for getting their teeth out, but I got a freaking broken bone over here. So he calls his doctor. Doctor calls Aetna and has what's called a peer to peer. And Doug's doctor, talks to the Aetna doctor that makes the decisions. And Doug's doctor says, "Advil ain't cutting it, Mr. Aetna doctor man. I would like to prescribe him 40 milligrams of oxycodone twice a day until he heals under my supervision." And Aetna doctor says, "Okay, no problem, approved." And so, yes, they make money, and they did, and probably still do. And that's the workaround, right? There's always a workaround for insurance companies to make money, and that's how they do it.
Now, in terms of stuff like you talked earlier about your brother having diabetes, was insulin a common treatment for that back then?
Uh, it was.
Was.
And back then, in the 70s and 80s, the insulin was dose dependent on sugar levels, which needed to be taken about every 4 to 6 hours via a finger stick
Yeah.
with a blood swab, and you put it into this little machine, and it would let you know what your A1C or your blood sugar levels were. So then you'd have to kind of guess the dose of the insulin uh, injection with a needle and the insulin there in your hand. And dude, I was like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, like doing this because my mom was at work, and I'm like, well, just put the needle in here, pull it out, put it in his leg, give him the insulin. Um, so, I mean, that's what we did. And if his blood sugar dropped too much, he'd have a full blown seizure. And as a young girl, I knew what to do. I had a little basket which had, and I'll never forget this. And to this day, I can't look at sugar packets because I would take orange juice and mix it in a cup with a sugar packet and have to you know like hold his mouth in such a way that you're about to give CPR, but instead you pour the orange juice sugar mixture down into the mouth. And it yeah, I can't look at sugar packets, but it's insulin's come a long way since then. But a lot of diseases that were like my brother's, right, that didn't have the kind of treatment that we do have today, which is the good part of pharma. um, they left people like my brother back then in a state where it affected his confidence. It affected his the milestones that he would have achieved, going to homecoming and going to prom, and doing these things that are normal, but he didn't want to do because he was afraid he would have a seizure and it would be embarrassing. Um, so, the good part of pharma is now, we have modalities to treat type 1 diabetes and other childhood illnesses such that children can live, a normal life and not miss those milestones and not die, in early age. So there is a good part of pharma, and thank you for bringing that up.
Now, do you think insulin has been artificially inflated by big pharma at all? I know
I
that
do.
it's a big talking point nowadays where
Yeah.
Insulin prices in the United States are a lot different from prices in Europe or Canada.
Yeah. And, there's a good reason for that. And, unfortunately, it is nefarious, right? You take a piece of coal and you find a diamond in it, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, I must find all of the diamonds and then sell them for all of the money in the world. And I've just discovered this great new shiny thing. So, there's, as insulin and medication for diabetes and A1C levels have progressed, uh, there is a following who wants a nibble for a different side effect, such as obesity. And so we have seen a huge shortage of medications like Ozempic, for example, which initially was created for type 2 diabetics, those with metabolic syndrome, which is pre-diabetes. And there's been a slew of men's and women's health centers that are able to buy and bill that product. And so once you buy and bill a product, and if you don't know what that is, say I'm a pharma rep, I'm like, hey doc, I know you've got 50 patients with type 2 diabetes, but also you've got 50 more who are just obese and they don't have diabetes. What if I sell you 100 units, use 50 for your diabetics, and use the other 50 for those that are overweight because they're going to drop weight and you can just charge them cash?
Wow.
That's what's happening now in the diabetic arena.
That's incredible. And so, do you think there should be restrictions placed on the amount that a company should be allowed to charge for stuff like insulin that is life-saving medicine?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. I think it should. I mean, look, it's the government needs to come down on doctor per doctor and say, okay, if you're buying and billing this, how many patients are you really prescribing this to that actually have diabetes? I need to see the numbers. I want an audit. But
Yeah.
history repeats itself. This happened with the opioid epidemic. Now it's happening with Ozempic. And we're seeing these drugs be misused by doctors that take a fucking oath to save lives and do no harm. Yet the greed causes them to do harm. Not just for patients that are taking something like Ozempic for weight loss, when really they just need to change their dang diet. Get on the treadmill. Find out, how about find out if there's an underlying condition like hormone imbalance, a thyroid test. When was the last time they got blood work? Do they have cancer? We don't know. They just feel fat and they go to and I thought about it. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, ooh, dang, my body be changing. Like, maybe I should go get this shot. I will not. I will not. I will sit here a little overweight and figure out how to balance my hormones and not cheat the system and not take one dose of medication away from a diabetic who needs it. But not everyone thinks like me. You should see the women in my neighborhood. They're all on this shit. And none of them have diabetes. And they're paying cash. And the doctors are making money. And nobody fucking cares.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I was reading through the Purdue Pharma case, and one of like the aspects basically that they had to settle on was basically that they were conspiring. This is straight from the Department of Justice. The conspiracy also involved aiding and abetting violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by facilitating the dispensing of its opioid products, including OxyContin, without a legitimate medical purpose and thus without lawful prescriptions. So basically, prescribing it to people that didn't need it.
Right.
Wow.
It seems like the similar thing is perhaps happening with insulin, you could argue.
It is. Oh, there's no argument. It's happening. But how long did it take for Purdue to settle and say, okay, I admit we did this XYZ, here it is on paper. So it's going to take another 10 years for somebody, a class action lawsuit, to come upon the makers of these diabetic medications like Ozempic. There's about 4 others that are out there, and they're being prescribed off label. You cannot prescribe a drug off label and get away with it without it catching up to you.
Do
And
you think
I saw doctors do it for 25 plus years.
do you think that doctors, it's like, do they know? Do most of them know? They're like, oh, we're fucking people up. Are they waking up and just like, oh, this is just my job. I just sell drugs. Like that's what I signed up to do. Or like half of them waking up like, man, this dude is, you know, gonna fuck himself up on this drug that's not even meant for this purpose. But hey, money's money. How many of these? What do you think the ratio is for the ones who are aware and don't care, and the ones who are just doing their job, or what they perceive as their job?
It depends if we're talking about the opioid epidemic or the overuse or misuse of Ozempic for diabetes. I think those ratios would be a little different. Um, but you bring up a good point. So let's start with opioids, right? Because that's kind of where doctors like went way left and way left field, right? Um, I I I think they were of the school of thought that I believe what I read, I believe what I'm told, I believe what I learn in the required classes I need to take to maintain my license. They're old school medicine is very literal, and so I think that the majority of them saw an opportunity to help others and make a shit ton of money at the same time. Now, at some point, for each one of those physicians, something in their gut, if they were human beings, had to have clicked and said, there's a line all the way down US 1. This can't be right. People's teeth are falling out on my desk. Something's not right. But did they stop? Some did. The majority did not. Some, a lot, went to jail. And there's about 25%, maybe a little more, 30%, and this could be a topic for another day, turned their pill mills into what's called Suboxone mills, clinics. Suboxone is a medication which is a opioid agonist at the kappa receptor and an antagonist at the gamma receptor. So it acts like an opioid, but it kicks the opioid out of the receptor and stops overdose and cravings. So those doctors that were left, they got so heavy into selling oxy that they lost their regular patient base. So now what the fuck they gonna do? Well, in comes Suboxone. Suboxone is going to save patients from opioid overdoses, which it does. I've got some love in my heart for it. Not the doctors that flip-flopped from a pill mill into a Suboxone mill, which they're still making money off of in the same way.
Yeah, create a problem and then sell the solution.
Yeah.
That's exactly what, and it's so personal to me, so very personal to me.
Yeah, and for all these people that, buy these drugs, obviously some of them pay cash and others get it through their insurance. It would look from the outside, especially for those who don't really know the situation, that these people that are purchasing these drugs, they give them money, and then they get their high, and they get paid. It seems like
Mhm.
a fairly simple business transaction from the outside looking in. Would you say that, provided it's legal, that these things should continue to happen, provided um,
Mm-mm.
the people getting paid are satisfied?
No.
Or do you think
And
there's more of a moral
I, I, I,
adjudication?
I give that a hard no, and here's why.
Yeah.
Um, with all we know that what happened with Purdue and the overuse and the off-label prescribing of oxycodone, um, and these pill mills and these doctors going to jail, and now we've got all of these patients out there that are walking around with their teeth falling out and they're dying, they're overdosing, and they're doing whatever they can. They're like, okay, well, maybe I'll smoke crack, maybe I'll shoot heroin. I mean, and they don't want to die, and they don't want to continue to do what they're doing. Who? No, they just don't want to be fucking sick. And if you don't know what dope sick is, you you've never been on dope because it's nothing like the flu. Here's what happens. When you're on oxy, heroin, fentanyl, and you hard stop taking that, you can't see, your legs feel like jelly, you shit yourself, you're hot, you're cold, you're hot and cold at the same time. You get in the bath, you take a cold shower, you shit some more, you crawl up in a corner, you scratch yourself until you bleed, you vomit, um, and you do that until you call a friend who says, hey, I got something you can smoke, and it's heroin. And that's the jump from oxy to heroin. Okay, so let me back up the truck to your question. Is it moral? Is it okay for what they're doing now with Suboxone? Patients are coming in, they're like, yes, treat me, help me. What's not okay is these Suboxone clinics that used to be pill mills are now, they're not charged, they could charge your insurance for a quote unquote urgent care visit or a physical visit, but they've monopolized what they used to make in oxy sales. They've monopolized that in saving the lives of the patients they put in peril to fucking begin with by saying, you want to be a part of my program? You want me to save your life? It's going to cost you $200 a visit per month. And maybe or maybe not, your insurance will cover the Suboxone. And by the way, I'm going to call that Suboxone into your pharmacy, and I hope they have it in stock because most pharmacies get robbed, or there's regulations on how much Suboxone, oxycodone, life-saving medication that they can have in stock at that time. So you might go into those withdrawals that you don't like so much, and I hope you don't overdose and go smoke some heroin until your Suboxone comes in. So is it moral? Fuck no.
I assume,
No.
Brayden, you're
Yeah.
asking because there are, I mean, there are like straight up whole states that legalize like pretty much all drugs, and there's the libertarian view that we should have complete autonomy, including being able to buy drugs. Is that why you brought it up, or?
Correct. Yeah, trying to play sort of like a devil's advocate for the freedom of influence type of deal. Um, but there's a quote from Baron von Rothschild. If I can control the money, I care not for their laws. And I feel like that is the perfect quote for this kind of situation.
Mm.
Now, in terms of bringing a case to put some sanctions on these types of deals or transactions, it would have to obviously be a class action suit, and it would more than likely have to be brought to the Supreme Court. What do you think are the chances of the people filing a class action lawsuit like that does make it to the Supreme Court? surviving beyond the next year or two while it gets filed.
My hope would be that it's highly likely. There's been a jump start on that. I know for a fact that the DOJ did a hardcore investigation on the company Indivior. If you want to look that up, if someone wants to
Yeah, Jamie, can you pull that up?
take a gander there. But yeah, there's a similar it was a similar lawsuit against Indivior for coming in to save the day with Suboxone, and overextended the promises, and made claims that were not actually there. And was that valid? Nah, some of it was, some of it was not. I know this because I worked there at the time and actually launched the drug. So, and the one that's there after, which is Sublocade, which is a injectable form of buprenorphine, which is much safer. But it's, where do we go from here? Do we go backwards, and who's going to spearhead a class action lawsuit now with the Supreme Court, when we've got another tertiary problem of fentanyl being brought in from Mexico and other countries? And we forget about Oxy. Fentanyl's in everything now. And I mean, a street Xanax could be cut with fentanyl because it's so cheap. It's like baking soda. So I've got a friend of mine that is pretty high up in the Orange County Sheriff's office. I won't name names, but I mean, he's confiscated marijuana, street marijuana, and what we would have considered lesser potent, drugs, Xanax, Percocets, pot, and they confiscate it, and it tests positive for fentanyl. So there's a whole tsunami of a shitstorm that is going to happen in the next 10 years because of fentanyl, that we have only seen the tips of that iceberg. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's already
and
become.
for my,
Yeah,
go ahead, Doug.
I was just gonna say it's already a pretty big topic in the Senate, and obviously right now they're just trying to throw everything on somebody else and assign blame, but it's already a big deal now. So I definitely won't be surprised as that snowball keeps rolling and gaining momentum, that we just find out more and more about more deaths or the ways it's getting in.
Yeah. From my understanding, fentanyl, what it does, or part of what it does at least, is it increases blood pressure, and it helps other drugs move throughout your body a lot faster than it normally would, resulting in faster and a deeper high. Is that correct?
It is,
Yeah.
yes. So
So I was wondering if, so obviously this is partially for profit margins for the people that are dealing these drugs, because you don't, I would assume you wouldn't need as much of it in order to get a high, but too much of
yeah,
it can easily lead to an overdose, is also what I understand.
yeah. So that's what the danger is. Because I mean, this is not a new drug, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been around since like the 60s, 70s. However, it was only used in like emergency rooms, or during, excuse me, during surgeries. Um but it's different now in strength. But back then in the 60s, it it worked by just mimicking like the body's natural endorphins, to block, you know, pain receptors to the brain during surgeries. But that kind of distribution of that medication for the respective surgery was controlled by an anesthesiologist. um, and what's happening now is, and you should know, it's I might have mentioned this, but it's 50 times more potent than heroin, and it's 100 times more, one dose, 100 times more potent than morphine. um, so with almost 50,000 people dying of an overdose of fentanyl, and this is, you know, what was in their blood, not oxy, fentanyl. That was 2014. So we're seeing more fentanyl showing up in blood work, in autopsies, versus a drug that one might think they were taking, such as a Percocet or an oxycodone pill. Um, I mean, it's illegally manufactured everywhere. It's in China, it's in Mexico. Um, I mean, it's used in place of heroin, like without even like the street buyer's knowledge. Like they've got no freaking idea like what they're buying. They think it's heroin, and they're like, okay, I've been using heroin for 10 years. I know how to dose myself. They use the same dose, but they don't know it's fentanyl. And those are the ones that die.
Yeah. I had a coworker, and his brother died from a heroin overdose because he went through rehab, and it's thought that, obviously once you get out of rehab, your body has adjusted to different levels of heroin.
Yeah.
And once he got out, obviously, the first thing he wants to do is go straight back to
Yeah.
heroin. Yeah. So he gets some heroin in his system, but it has fentanyl in it. So as a result, he ends up getting too much of it, overdoses, and just dies. Um, that was very tragic for my coworker, but I think it also spells out how fentanyl is made street drugs that were normally very common and typically not dangerous have become potentially lethal in the wrong hands.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that, but you bring up a good point, right? So you've got somebody like your coworker who's doing all the right things, and goes to rehab, and um unlike alcohol, for example, where they come out of rehab and they might take a shot of vodka or whatever. It's the same Smirnoff, right, as before
Yeah.
they went into rehab 6 months ago. um but with the advancement of um what's happened to heroin and how it's cut with fentanyl, as well as the tolerance, right? So if a person, like your coworker that you mentioned, is um, in rehab, they're learning all of these new skills. They're building back up their microbiome in the gut. They're eating protein. They're doing all the right things. And all of a sudden, if they come out and do even less than what they did before going into rehab, that little tiny bit, because their tolerance is now dropped, and the drug has increased in potency via cut with fentanyl, it's enough for yeah, an overdose,
Absolutely.
unintentional, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the big issues with it. Now, in terms of a class action lawsuit against these companies, do you think that there would have to be a certain level of government interference in order for something like that to actually take effect, in order for sanctions to take place? Or do you think it would simply be possible for it to be done by a single branch and it could be cut and dry right then and there, and pharma would stop, or would they buy their way into bypassing the sanctions for it?
I guess time will tell. I I wish that the answer that I want to give you would be the actual outcome, which would be yes, there will likely be a large class action lawsuit and the government will support it 100%. And, big pharma will go down hard and there'll be, laws passed where, doctors have to report exactly what they're doing, and states need to stop providing, you know, places for people to come and use and sell under supervision, because that's not helpful 80% of the time. Um, I wish I could say all of these things. I wish I could tell you that um, my 19-year-old son, who was unfortunately during COVID as a quarterback and, this sports athlete, shining star in high school, and during COVID had to homeschool, and their whole group of friends got into Oxy, and I almost lost him. I pray every day that he doesn't relapse. I wish I could say that every mother who shares the same sentiment could march somewhere uh, and make a change. Um, and maybe this is the start of that conversation, because who the fuck else is going to do it
Exactly.
except mothers who have seen their child foam at the mouth?
Yeah, it's absolutely rough. I think that you've kind of displayed the drug epidemic in a much different light than what I originally had viewed it as. I mean, obviously, I've seen videos of Kensington, um, and what some drugs can do to people, but I never really understood it to that extent. Beyond
Yeah,
that,
I mean, it changes the brain forever.
yeah, absolutely.
Not all drugs. I mean,
And would you say that the government should be interfering in this more than they are? Like, should they be offering clinics access to tax-funded, anti-drug pills, things that get people off of stuff like oxy or heroin?
yeah, I do.
Yeah,
And I don't think it's that the government doesn't want to. I just think that they don't know how.
yeah,
And I think there's a misappropriation of funding that gets passed through too many greedy hands before it gets to the patients that need it. And I can say this because I've been in the medical field for 25 plus years, and also 10 of those were spent in the addiction field. And when my son came to me and said, I need help, and I'll just say that. I said, okay.
gotcha.
I took a breath and I made some calls, and I was able to get him into detox that day. And
Good.
even that was difficult. And even that didn't happen the way it was supposed to. And then his transition to rehab didn't happen the way it was supposed to. And here I am, a mother that works for the company that manufactures the drug to get somebody off of Oxy. And it still was a slippery slope for me. Imagine somebody not in the medical professional field who wakes up to a foaming mouth child and has freaking no idea who to call, what to do. So does the government need to be more involved? They've had their chance, man, and they failed.
Yeah,
They failed. Um, I think this is in the hands of mothers, parents, people, humans. Um, you know, all over the world, not just in America, but I think there's not enough education out there either, not enough accurate, rather, um, education, and that's a problem because it's regulated by the government. And oh my,
Yeah, I can understand. That's not not something anyone should have to go through, especially not mothers of their own children suffering from something like that. I definitely think that government needs to interfere more than they are, and I do think that sanctions need to be placed on who is allowed to
I
produce
do.
these kind of pills.
How do we do that?
Uh, it's a
Well,
long process. Yeah, go
I
ahead, Deb.
mean, it it could be a sped up process. There's just not a chance in hell that either of the main two political candidates ever push for something like that. And unfortunately, politically speaking, a lot of what everyone's doing is just passing the buck, right? It's not the pharmacy's fault. It's China's fault. It's Mexico's
Yeah,
fault. It's the cartel's fault. It's their fault. It's not anyone else's fault. It's just them.
I think
So,
the reason people don't want to, like political parties especially, don't want to take it on is because what happened to the war on drugs, right? That blew up spectacularly and was a huge failure, right? It was very ineffective. And now it's like, oh, well, we tried and we failed. And now, we get spit on for it. So now everybody's like, well, if I just pass the buck and pass blame, I don't have to do anything about it. And I don't assume any of the risk of trying a solution and facing failure, unfortunately, because it is always, you can make the best plan in the world to like fix some of this stuff and it could still fail, whether it's through human error or through the people that are pushing this stuff, getting around whatever you're doing, because unfortunately the government is big and it has a lot of money to throw around, but it's a slow moving entity. And if
yeah,
people want to start pushing stuff, I mean it's just gonna happen, right? Like, I mean, fuck, think back to the prohibition era, right? Like that was another huge effort undertaken by the government. It was kind of I mean, it obviously got taken away eventually, but it's like they just kind of get to a point where, like, well, we can't stop all this stuff from going through. Like, if people want to get this stuff, they're just gonna get it. Like, are we willing to like gun down people that want to take a sip of alcohol? Are we willing to like, gun down citizens that are just dead set on, either creating demand or pushing the supply of these, of these drugs? And it's like, I don't know, like there are a lot of things the government could do. I just, I mean, it's a tough problem to crack.
I was also thinking a little bit earlier how you were talking about the ease of the creation of some of these newer drugs or opioids, and like you said, it's just Mountain Dew in a microwave to break this stuff down. And it's just, I mean, people are educated in chemistry very well. It's not hard to look this stuff up on the internet and figure it out, and it'll only get easier with more access to technology and just as it advances. I was just thinking in my brain, like, wow, it'll just get easier and easier for people to create this stuff, and in their
yeah.
home, like,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
Well,
especially you bring up a good point, and since the government is so behind, and they're just catching up with the opioid epidemic, so forget about fentanyl. Like they're not even there yet. I mean, you'll hear like talks about it, but like who at home like receives that and know, like now it's the norm. Oh, there's so and so died of a fentanyl, and it's clumped with oxy, and it's clumped with and that's not the case. It's these pills are cut with fentanyl, which most people don't realize means somebody's at home with a pill pressing machine taking a prescription bottle of Percocets and crushing them all up and making a giant little pile of powder and taking a bunch of fentanyl and mixing it up as if they're a trained chemist, and then pressing the pills to make it look like it's a Xanax or a Percocet. Um, and in a pressed pill like that, half could be 90% fentanyl and the other half could be 5% rat poison and 5%, well, 2.5 rat poison and 2.5 like baking soda. And there's no Percocet at all. You know, every pill is different, but it has the same stamp on it. And the danger there is that every single pill is different. And with fentanyl, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So once that happens, I mean, it binds to the opioid receptors, and like this euphoria and analgesia is like nothing they've ever known, and so they just want more. And it really only takes a couple of minutes, and that's if it's taken orally or snorted. I mean, forget about it. If it's injected, I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a tough world that we're living in with overdoses. And, the question becomes, what do we do? And my answer would be self-education. Educate your children, and not in a way that's scary or is not age appropriate. I mean, you got to be age appropriate. You don't want to pique curiosity where curiosity does not live. But it's a constant education and an eye on what they're doing, and COVID was a gobsmack of just a shoo-in for a bunch of overdoses. It really was. And where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that begs the next question. Who jumps in? Is it the government? We know how long that's going to take. So
I
what
think
do
a
we?
big problem with government interference also is that it's so against some core American values that I think it's just going to be very controversial no matter what you do. Not that it doesn't need to be done, but just kind of explain some of that slowness,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a huge difference in how a country like Portugal fights drugs and how America fights drugs. And one seems to be at least a little more effective, and the other one seems to be not effective at all. Where the American system is if you carry drugs or push drugs, you're a criminal. You're going to get treated like a criminal. And then we're also, on the other hand, going to go find the suppliers in places like take, for example, like the war on like cocaine or whatever, right? Like going to Colombia, burning all the cocaine farms and all that other stuff. But cocaine still finds a way to get there, right? It'll still get pushed, it'll still get smuggled in, and then people are still addicted at the end of the day because, like, you throw them in jail for a while, you don't address the root cause of their addiction, and they come out and they just get right back on it or keep pushing to their friends or whatever. Whereas in Portugal, you treat if you have drugs, you're treated as a patient, not as a criminal. You put in like a rehab, and they actually like address the cause of your problems so that you don't like overdose on stuff and even kick your addiction like altogether. Granted, it's a lot different scope, a lot different population, a lot different demographics, but it's just a totally night and day difference in terms of like what our countries are suffering through, right? Like Portugal isn't going through an opioid crisis or even a drug crisis at all, even though it's decriminalized there entirely. Whereas like in America where it's illegal, it's a huge problem. It has been a problem for a long time. Drugs have been a problem in America for a long, long time. And I think another problem with our approach and the reason that like going after the suppliers doesn't work is that other countries eventually just go, we don't care, America, about your citizens taking our product and using it. Like we make money off of pushing cocaine to you or growing coca leaves or putting coca in our tea or putting any number of things. And we're going to keep doing that because it's best for us. And you should treat maybe your own citizens and treat it like it's your problem, not ours. So like we struggle to find foreign partners nowadays that are willing to like help us with our approach, and that just makes it all the more hard. But we've already entrenched ourselves in this system of going after it this way that it almost seems like we like you just have people like when you talk about people that are like anti-drug, they want like the old school war on drugs and they want to ramp it up. You find very few people that are like, oh yeah, the Portugal system would work. I mean, there are younger people that maybe think that, but I'd say a majority of Americans are online with the old thinking, which has just not been effective.
I know RFK is he's gaining a lot of momentum. Um, and on the
Oh,
back
has
of
he gone
it,
from like 2% to 3% or what? Like how huge a momentum are we talking?
okay, I'll say this: people are at least talking about him. So, that's a start as
Easy.
far as independent candidates go. But a lot of his talking points are about big pharma and the drug push, and he doesn't seem scared of just flat out saying like it's their fault. It, a large part of our healthcare system is just fucked up. Um, and I think he said something recently where he was saying when his uncle was in office, they spent like 6% of the U.S. GDP on healthcare, and like right now it's like 13%. And this wasn't directly related to drugs, but it was part of the conversation. So I do think there is a solution here, and I think it can be really easy to like outsource the problem to other countries or small time criminals. But I do think a large portion of it is very obviously these, um, like you said, just the companies pushing pills to everybody all the time. Like how easy it is to get your hands on them and then immediately slip into the street market. It's just too easy. So I mean, I'm sure all these things are playing a role in different portions of it, but
Absolutely.
Problems always also like manifested over time. It feels like where it maybe started off as like a big pharma, either through negligence or through malice, pushing an addictive product,
mhm.
and then it transferred into something that became illegal or has become primarily taken over by illegal pushing of either heroin or fentanyl or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. I know we kind of slipped away from, um, your personal work experience and went down the opioid rabbit hole, but I'd love to jump back to hopefully go down a much lighter path and kind of talk about um, your successes in that field and your approaches to selling those things and maybe even the process, the day-to-day process of how it works, I think would be cool to hear.
Absolutely. I do. If I could just say one last
Sure.
thing about the opioid epidemic, and what other countries are doing versus what we're doing. And then Doug, yes, for sure. Like, let's get lighter. Um, but what one thing that has struck me that you guys have all touched upon is the criminalization of um, addiction, right? So if we're going to recognize opioid use disorder in the diagnostic and statistical manual for psychological disorders as a legitimate disease, then why do we arrest those that are inflicted with this disease and put them in jail and they die or they come out and they don't have a treatment program? So it's the only we don't arrest somebody that eats too many donuts and has a seizure. So we've got all of these patients out there that are ODing, and they might have set amount of opioids in their pocket, and they go to jail, but it's diagnostically recorded as a brain disease. So do we, when there's a gray alert, and somebody with Alzheimer's is like fled the coop, do we put them in jail? We do not. So I just want to close that topic with that. But yeah, going back to um, what I do in the daily, how can I answer questions there?
Um, I suppose I would like to hear as far as like the presentation part of the job is like what is that like?
Mhm.
Personally, it's hard to talk in front of a lot of people, So I've always found, like just anyone in sales who's standing up in a crowd and like speaking or, presenting something in the job field, I'm just like, how do you do it? That's crazy. What what is like the prep process, to that? And are
Yeah,
there like strategies you've kind of developed over time? Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, for sure. And for me, it's always just really being myself and not trying to follow a script that my company taught me during training, right? Like
Mm,
I want to be knowledgeable, of course, of a product that I'm selling, whether it's, a a fully human like monoclonal antibody for osteoporosis. I want all the science. I want to know all the things. So if a doctor tries to get smart with me or just test me or really just genuinely wants to know knowledge, like doesn't matter. I can answer his questions. So, number one is being knowledgeable of what it is that and I don't even like to say selling, what I'm recommending him to prescribe. And I don't ask for all the patients. I'm like, who would be the best? I ask more questions than I probably do talk and present, um, if that helps. So, I want to know, Dr. Doug, you've got a very high population of women that are over 65. What percentage of those are osteopenic or osteoporotic? And what do you do for them? And therein lies my opening to find a place to play nice in the sandbox with other products, find a place for my product that makes sense for the right patient. And I don't want them all. I never want all the patients. I want the right ones. And I want the doctors that I'm partnering with to really feel that when I'm presenting and to know that I'm not asking for the pie. I don't want the pie. No one should have the pie. Everybody is different. And I think in my early experience, I learned that from asking for the full pie, and I learned, okay, there's a place for every product in every disease state that makes sense. And I want to know not just everything about my product, but my competitors. So, that's just a term we use. It's just other products, other companies, right? Other products for the same disease state. I want to know where I can position mine with each doctor's office that makes sense so that I'm respected and earn the right to ask for the business, for the right reasons and for the right patients. Does that make sense?
It just sounds like you're describing supply and demand. Identify your demographic. Sell your product.
Exactly.
Eh,
Oh, I mean, not to
well,
break it down to to sound so simple. Obviously, I don't think it
it
is.
is. Well, it is simple though. That's my point.
But
I mean,
I imagine you're someone. You're probably one of the fewer people who are doing it. That's like what the best business people do. They immediately go in. It's like one of the first steps is identify demographic and then supply and demand. So yeah,
Yeah.
good
Is there
job.
anything you've done
well,
in your job that has that the common person would not know about, or something that's like surprised you about working in the pharmaceutical industry that the average Joe just wouldn't comprehend or wouldn't know about unless they were told specifically?
uh, this also sounds like a simple answer.
That's
But
fine.
it's just my moral compass, and it's just who I am, and that is, I would say a lot of sales reps in general, maybe even outside of the pharmaceutical industry, are very uh, narrow-minded and thinking, got to get to the decision maker, must talk to the doctor, must talk to the one that writes the prescriptions. And it's not that I don't care. I do, because it's my livelihood, but I come from a place in a very ghetto neighborhood growing up, where we would take homeless people in and they'd sleep, in a tent in our garden area in safety until we could get them help. So my philosophy has always been treat everybody the same, whether it's the janitor that I'm opening the door for, who's coming in to clean, all the way up to the CEO of a multifunctional facility with 25 locations and a CEO that I'm going to go talk to. I treat them all the same, with the same respect, the same smile, the same congeniality. And I don't like to say that's taken me far, because that's not my intention in doing those things. It's just who I am. And I think that whether it be this industry or another one, that it would guide and yield unintentional and intentional success at the same time.
I think that's great. It's like one. It reminds me of the golden rule from elementary school: treat others the way you want to be treated.
I mean,
Like
it's simple.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes like we take that rule for granted. I kind of recall, when I was in college, I would hold doors open for people, which is very common where I'm from, which is Iowa. And I'd have people from like New Jersey, New York, where we're just like, "Whoa, that's so nice of you." And I'm just like, "Yeah, it took me like 2 seconds to open this door for you. Just like, it's fine." And they were like, "I've never had anyone do that for me before." I'm like, "Really?" It's not. I mean, glad you're happy, but like, gosh, that's pretty sad, honestly.
Yeah.
It's sad. What the hell?
They didn't really care that much. They were just high on crack.
Yeah, they were just yeah, sure. They were just hitting on me, clearly. Just every single person. It's fine.
Just lost in the
I mean,
sauce, tweaking.
you do
Yikes.
have nice eyes, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Don't inflate
But
his ego any more than it is. He's lying.
no,
This
please,
whole humble
yeah,
act. I hold
I
doors
mean,
open for
listen,
people.
Yeah,
if
look at
he
him.
opened the door for me, I'd be like, oh my God, no one's ever done this in my whole life. What's your number?
Dude, that door is so heavy. How are you doing that? Thank you. Your muscles
Can
must
you
be
carry
so
my
big.
groceries to the car afterwards? I've got
oh,
some gas pumping. Can you help me out?
oh yeah, for sure. I'll be sure to tip my fedora on the way by too. Don't you worry.
I talked to you like you were
Uh,
special.
So great.
Where's your mom, little buddy? Thanks for holding open the door for me.
Look at
yeah,
you,
I'm
little
sure you would.
guy.
Hey, however you want to react to my kindness, that's fine. Some
Yeah.
people are thankful, some people are just hilarious, but
What if you
You
held
know
open the
what?
door
whatever.
for the robber, like in Spider-Man?
Or that.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kindness goes a long way, whether
True.
it's, it's part of who you are, or if you're trying to make somebody's day, or because your mom told you to do so. I mean, whatever. It spreads.
Yeah. The the
Yes.
the
Absolutely.
moral we should take from this conversation is you should be kind to everyone, including robbers. Make sure you hold the door open for them too. Right? That's
And
what.
sell them Oxy on the side.
And sell them oxy on the side. Yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh my goodness.
And make some money while you're doing it, and also start a riot. So,
Yep, exactly.
or a movement.
Potato,
Are there
potato.
methods now um that you use to kind of maintain efficacy in terms of what you do now?
Yes. Um, well, now, if I didn't mention this at the beginning, I've parted ways from the general pharmaceutical industry, and I'm now in the aesthetic sales industry. And to ensure that efficacy, morals, and staying on label and being compliant in this new industry um, are not just relatable but explainable to my providers. Um, I make sure that we have long conversations before I make a sale. Right. Because, and like I said before, I don't even like to call it selling, and I don't to them. I'm saying this to you guys because I'm in sales. But even to my, the plastic surgeons that I call on, the dermatologists, um, medical spas that I call on, estheticians. I want them to have a really good understanding of the efficacy, the mechanism of action of my products, exactly who they're prescribed for, and I don't want them to go outside those lines. And I make that clear for the sake of their protection and for their business. And I think that's fair. And I'm at a point in my life where if it's not, I'll go to the next office.
That's good. What are some of the differences between the two industries?
Yeah. Oh man, so many. Great question, Doug.
Thank you.
Um,
See, guys, I ask good questions.
you do.
So you can, buddy.
Uh,
You're not getting them from me.
yeah, yeah. So, you know what's interesting is in aesthetics, the gray area is much, much, much wider, but the harm is much smaller. So, if I'm presenting a device for microneedling, which is something that is a device that penetrates the dermis and um, uh, causes a particular serum to penetrate the skin deeper. If somebody goes, you know, too high on the frequency of the microneedling device, that person's not going to overdose.
Mm.
It just might have a rash, right? And they're so it's interesting in that the gray area is wide, but the results of going outside that gray area are not catastrophic, which helps me to sleep at night. But I also still try and keep them within those lines, and that comes from my background. I can't say the same for my peers because they want all the business, so they might be like, "Oh, look at this wide gray space; it's so fun."
Mm.
I can't do it because of my background. Um, and sometimes that hinders my percent to my target or my goal, but I can sleep at night. And so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's good.
And you said that you work in the aesthetic field, right?
Yes.
So, what are your thoughts on dermaplaning? Because I've heard that term used a few times before from people that I know that are dermatologists as an
Yeah.
alternative way to clear out different oils and greases from the face, and it's less harmful. What do you think about dermaplaning?
I am a big fan.
Yeah.
So dermaplaning, and for those that don't know what that is when a doctor, nurse, or certified esthetician is properly trained. They take a very small blade. Actually, it's not much different than a razor, but it's a little bit less cumbersome in the hand, and it looks like a 10 blade, like just a blade.
Yeah.
Um, And what it does is it takes off all of the peach fuzz off of the face and the top layer of dead skin cells, usually in combination with a, a more advanced facial procedure. And it leaves the skin not just smooth, but super radiant and without like those little flyaways like a lot of women have the peach fuzz. And we don't want to take a razor to our face. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So the alternative to that would be facial threading, which is very common in Asia, and there's some places that do it here. Or really just using one of those little bzz things. I forgot what that's called, but on your face at home, and that's not safe. So dermaplaning is definitely, so I get it done once a month.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Yeah.
Would you say that that chemicals nowadays that are used in aesthetic medicine or similar items, would you say they have become less harmful, or would you say they're more harmful?
It depends on the company
Yeah.
and it depends on the brand. I would say aesthetics as a whole are moving in a direction that is less harmful for the skin with respect to chemicals. And I'll give you an example. And I won't say who I work for now, but I will say, all of our products, peels are um, surprisingly paraben free, sulfate free, fragrance free, free from microplastics. And this might be a dead giveaway, but it's the only company um, that manufactures products that are free of microplastics. And it's the products are also contamination free, which what that means is everything comes in a pump, or you never have to put your fingers in it, basically. And everything is recyclable down to the springs in the pumps. We're now switching to plastic, so they can be recycled, and nothing is tested on animals. So you can't get much better than that.
No, you really can't.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah.
Dude, you should ask her to hook you up, dude. Your face is looking a little rough.
Wow.
Just because I have to shave every day. The military has not been nice to my face. I will tell you that much.
Oh, I've got something for that. I've got a cream for that.
Oh, sick! Feel free to send it over. I'll use it for sure.
You could always
Gosh,
do laser hair removal.
I could, but like, eh,
Yeah.
it's fine. I don't need a pretty face. I'll just keep taking razors to it every day. It's fine.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
Of
just
course, of
spend all that
course.
money on razor blades and shaving cream, and the 10 minutes of your day that gets taken out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Can we talk about how expensive razor blades are nowadays? Like, and with how fast I have to go through them. Oh my gosh, it is insane.
I get them cheap. I get them $2 a piece.
Really?
Yep.
Isn't there that company? Whatever happened to that company that had like the really funny commercial?
Dollar Shave?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to them. I never used them. But I
Oh,
found that single blade shaving with how fast I've had to get ready some mornings is not helpful. So I usually just defer to using Gillette razors, and you know
oh,
those are pretty pricey
God.
nowadays. Like a package
No.
for them in Florida is like 30 or $35. It's crazy.
All right. Sidebar after this, I'm going to make sure you guys know where to get the proper shaving gel slash face wash with a serum that you put on afterwards that creates no ingrown hairs or redness, and
Razor burn, yeah. Mm-hmm.
where's yeah, well, yep, erythema. So I will hook you guys up. I promise.
She's working,
Hell
guys.
yeah.
She's off the clock and she's
That's
still
it.
working. For
Hey,
the
you
next
know what? I'm okay with this. Hell yeah. But do we have any more questions for our guest? I've we've covered so much that I feel like I've learned a ton. So I have nothing else to ask personally, but Brayden, Dougie, what about you?
No, I feel the same way.
I did want to ask about just the classic fucking pixels to politics question, technology and evolution of technology within your field, and the magic two letters that I love, AI. Look, they're both shaking their heads at me.
Well, I've got a great answer. I've got a great answer for you. In the aesthetic world, AI is extremely welcome. And it's something that we're investing with the company I work for now, a great amount of R&D into for the sake of being able to directly communicate with estheticians that have questions on the spot, on the fly, or even for training purposes. So it's definitely, it's got a heart around it in aesthetics. And I see that growing, I would imagine, in the pharma space as well. Now, this is with the companies. Now, for the clinicians, all clinicians are very old school. So, they're going to be behind. So it's up to us, you guys, us, the AIs, promoters of the world, to show them just how easy and beneficial educationally and technologically it can be to assist them, not just in my area of aesthetics, but in surgeries. And I mean, that is just a whole world getting ready to blossom.
Yeah, not to jump into another topic, but I know in terms of manufacturing these products and not just aesthetics, but mainly in um, big pharma, the pills and medicines, AI plays such a large role, plays such a massive role. But yeah, the wetware interface with AI is probably the biggest role it'll play, just because it makes access to information so much easier and kind of quickly summarize things and answer questions a lot quicker. Um, but yeah, I think that's everything. Fellas,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd say that's about it.
Is there anything
Yeah,
you would like?
thanks.
Oh.
No, I was just gonna say thanks for coming on.
Well,
No, please, Dougie, go ahead and interrupt me. It's fine.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I was going to ask our guest if she would like to say anything else before she left, because
Oh yeah, no,
they're our
Doug's the
guests.
polite one here apparently.
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't know why
shit.
you're assaulting me. You're the one not giving our guests time to speak here. What the hell?
Well, I don't know. He holds doors open for people. I
My
think he got some tough competition here.
True. Feel challenged. But no, please,
well,
please go ahead.
you you can hold the door open for me anytime. That's number
Of course.
two, in totality, Braden and Blackhearted. Doug, thank you so much for having me. And it's been an absolute pleasure and delight. You guys are amazing. And I'd love to come back soon. There's so much to pick apart and so many topics when it comes to medicine and everything in between. So thank you guys so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.